Hey guys, welcome to another video, and today I'm going to do a tier list of my predictions for the new Premier League season. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video.
Hey guys, welcome back to another video, and today we are going to be voting, well I am going to be voting the Premier League. So this is going to be a tough one, because I know, it's hard predicting anything, but we're going to start off with Arsenal. Now, Arsenal, they're doing pretty well for themselves. Doing pretty decent in the Champions League. They beat PSV 4-0. They did drew against Spurs at home, but North London derby, it's difficult. They beat Everton 1-0 away from home. They beat Man United 3-1. Fulham, they drew against 2-2. Arsenal beat Crystal Palace with a red in the 1-0. And beating Forest, beating Man City and Pens in the Community Shield. They're looking like a confident team, but I will say, I'm gonna go for a shock. I'm gonna say that you're actually no, never mind. I will say Champions League. Okay, Aston Villa. Now, Aston Villa, they're cooking. They're actually cooking. Like with this pretty good team. Like, I know they did lose to a Polish team in the Conference League, but after being in the Conference League or any international competition at all is European competition at all is just amazing. But they beat Crystal Palace 3-1. They did lose to Liverpool 3-0. They beat Burnley 3-1. Against Hibernian, they beat them 3-0 and 5-0, which is insane. They lost to Newcastle 5-1, unfortunately, but they did come back against Everton with a 4-0 win. And I feel like Aston Villa will be, I'm going to say that they will be Europa League contenders. Now, Burnley, they're just not doing good at all. They're rightly so at the bottom. They can't perform. They can't get anything right. They lost against Man United. They drew against, to be fair, they did well defensively to draw against Nottingham Forest with a red card. They did beat Salford City 4-0, but it's the EFL Cup, and they lost to the Spurs 5-2. Again, losing to Aston Villa 3-1. They've just been on a losing streak, and it's just not what you'd be looking for. And I'm gonna say that they will be a relegated team. So now what we have is Bournemouth. Bournemouth are along the same story, but they are getting a few points. I will say that it's risky. They've lost 3-1 against Brighton, 0-0 against Chelsea, 2-2 against Brentford. They did beat Swansea in the EFL Cup, but narrowly, only 3-2 in. They lost 2-0 against Spurs at home. They lost 3-1 against Liverpool, even when they had a red, but it is at Anfield and it's difficult to play there. But you're a Premier League team. You have to do better. But I will say, I don't think they will get relegated. I'll just put them there, perfectly fine, in the lower mid-table. So now we have Brentford. They're not doing as well as I would have thought in the league. They lost 3-1 against Everton at home. They lost against Newcastle 1-0. They drew against Bournemouth 2-2. in the EFL Cup, they only narrowly beat Newport County on pens, and Newport is in the fourth division of English football. Still professional team, yeah, of course, but it's a Premier League against a fourth division professional team in England. I think that they should have won by a larger margin and not having to go on penalties, but that's football. They drew against Crystal Palace 1-1. They did beat Fulham 3-0. Drew against Spurs 2-2. They've done all right, and they've managed in the past 2 seasons in the Prem. They have done extremely well. So I will say they're going to be in the higher mid-table. Now we're on a really good one, Brighton, having only lost one match in the last 5 games and winning the rest of them is just superb, man. Like, we're going to be looking at this, 3-1 against Bournemouth, 3-1 against Man United, 3-1 against Newcastle, and then they lost 3-1 against West Ham, but then they beat Wolves 4-1. They've just been on fantastic form, and I believe that they will be a Champions League contender. I know it's a pretty shocking call to make this early, but I do believe it can happen. Now we're on Chelsea. Chelsea are just they're in a rut, aren't they? They're just not performing well. They are slacking off almost with a £1 billion size for a transfer market. It's just not good. They signed so many players and didn't even let go of many, and they haven't integrated them well. There's so much good squad depth, but it's like too much. There's so many players, they probably don't even know each other that well, and you can see that visibly on the pitch. They lost to Aston Villa at home and conceded a red as well. They drew to Bournemouth away. They lost to Nottingham Forest at 1-0 at home. They only narrowly beat AFC Wimbledon in the EFL Cup 2-1. They beat Luton 3-0. They lost to West Ham even when they had a red 3-1. And they drew against Liverpool 1-1. It's just not good enough, and I feel like they'll be in the lower mid-table. Now we're on City. If we're gonna say anything about City, I'm not even gonna have to say anything, because I will say they'll be and they'll get the Premier League title again, because they've just been in fantastic form. They won the treble last season. They've got some of the best players in the world, and their team is the best team in the world. It's just that's why I think it's going to be. Of course, it can change, but personally, I just think it's going to be that. So now we have, let me just check again, Everton. Okay, if we look at Everton's past few games, 3-1 against Brentford, yeah. Lost to Arsenal 1-0 at home. Drew against Sheffield. Narrowly beat Doncaster in the EFL Cup, again another team in the 4th division if I'm right, and did not get promoted to 3rd division. They lost to Wolves 1-0 at home. They were beaten by Aston Villa 4-0 away from home. Lost to Fulham. They did beat Sporting, but that's friendly in pre-season, So I believe that they'll be low mid-table as well. Now we are on Nottingham Forest, who aren't doing too bad. 2 wins, 2 losses, and a draw. Obviously, it could be could be better, but it also could be much worse. So they did lose to Manchester City, but it's Manchester City. If we're gonna be honest, they drew against Burnley at home, but Burnley did have a red, so I feel like they could have done better there. They did beat Chelsea 1-0. They lost to Burnley in the EFL Cup. They were beaten by Man United. They beat Sheffield United, and they were beaten by Arsenal. So overall, I think that they're not, they're not bad by any means, but I still think that they'll probably be lower mid-table. But I'm gonna just rearrange this in the order that I think it will be. I feel like, okay, yeah, it will be like that. Actually no, Everton. So Everton would be 17th, Nottingham 16th, Bournemouth 14th, Chelsea 13th. Okay, now we are on Fulham. Fulham is not doing as well as I would have expected. They are 11th, which is decent, but two losses and two draws and only one win. It's not satisfactory, and they're not getting that much of a end result. If we're gonna be honest, 0-0 draw against Crystal Palace. They did win 1-0 against Luton. 5-1 loss against Manchester City. Again, it's Manchester City. They beat Spurs but on pens in the EFL Cup. They drew against Arsenal away from home with a red card, so they did really well. They lost against Brentford. They beat Everton. They've done decently, but decent isn't that. I feel like they will be higher mid-table. I wouldn't say Conference League level, but higher league. Okay, now we have Liverpool. Liverpool are such a good team. They found their form again, and I'm happy for them. But I'm not a Liverpool fan by any means. But it's good to see that they're back, because last season woeful, just really down there. And didn't expect it, because they used to be so dominant in the Prems not too long ago. But now they seem to be back to their winning form. They beat Wolves 3-1. They beat Aston Villa 3-0. They beat Newcastle even with a red away from home 2-1. They beat Bournemouth with a red 3-1. Drew to Chelsea, and they've just been on fire. So I feel like they will be getting definitely second place. Now we have Luton. Well, do I really have to say much? Luton are 18th in the league. They did get a draw, but their other 4 games have been losses. They narrowly beat Gillingham in the EFL Cup, or Gillingham, whatever. I'm not that good at remembering these pronunciations. West Ham beat them 2-1. Fulham beat Luton 1-0. They drew against Wolves, but they should have lost really, because that handball was that pen was just so bizarre. That's their only draw, and it should have been a loss anyway, so they should literally be dead last in the league. And all of these last things, they've just been losses. So Luton, they're going dead last in the relegation. Now we have Newcastle. Now Newcastle are doing okay, but you would expect them to be just a little bit higher, but that incredible 8-0 win against Sheffield wasn't crazy. They drew against Milan away from home in the Champions League, beat Brentford 1-0. They lost to Brighton 3-1, and Liverpool 2-1, and Man City, but then they beat Aston Villa 5-1. They've been doing decent, but I feel like they'll just get Conference League this season, not much other than that. Now, Crystal Palace are actually doing pretty decently for themselves, because usually they'd be even low in the league, but they're 10th. They're doing okay so far. They have 2 losses, 2 draws, and 1 win. Looking at their matches, a 3-0 loss against in the EFL Cup against Man United, a 0-0 draw against Fulham, 3-1 loss against Aston Villa. They beat Wolves 3-2. They beat Plymouth Argyle in the EFL Cup 4-2. Drew against Brentford. They lost to Arsenal 1-0. They beat Sheffield 1-0. They've been doing decently. They'll be in the higher mid-table for me. Okay, now we are on to Sheffield. Sheffield is another club which I think are going to get relegated. They are dead last right now in the Premier League. 4 losses and a draw. It's just not good enough. Again, 8-0 loss against Newcastle. Massive blow on their morale. They lost against Spurs. They drew against Everton. They lost to Lincoln in the EFL Cup on pens, which is just poor in my opinion, because I think Lincoln are in the third division of football in England. They lost against Manchester City. They lost against Nottingham 2-1 as well. They lost to Crystal Palace 1-0. They've just been losing, and losing. I think that they will be 19th. Now we're on Spurs. Now this is the club that I am genuinely shocked about. I am surprised how good they've become. Like it really weird this season. I'm not expecting them. Like 4 wins and a draw. That is an insane form for them. And their draw was away from home against Arsenal. The rest have been wins. 2-1 against Sheffield, 5-2 against Burnley. They did beat Fulham they lost to Fulham on pens in the EFL League, sadly for them. 2-0 against Bournemouth, 2-0 against Man United, another draw against Brentford back at the start of the season in their first match. I think that they will get Europa League football. Now we're on Manchester United. Manchester United is an interesting club to talk about. They're 9th in the league so far, 3 losses and 2 wins. They just seem to not be good, They had pretty big, decent signings, but with their centre-backs, injured, they have Martinez, and then they also have Lindelof out, and Varane. They have to rely on Jordan Evans, maybe even Phil Jones and Maguire. They have beaten Burnley 1-0. They lost to Bayern 4-3 in the Champions League. They lost to Brighton 3-1. They lost to Arsenal 3-1. They beat Nottingham 3-2. They lost to Spurs 2-0. And at the start of the season, the first match was a win, but I was watching that match, didn't really seem like a win. I will say that they would be 8th highest team there in that position, but West Ham, they are doing pretty good. They won in the Europa League against Baka Topola in 3-1. Lost against Man City 3-1. They beat Luton 2-1. They beat Brighton 3-1. They beat Chelsea 3-1. They drew against Bournemouth 1-1. And their first match, no, that's a friendly, my bad. West Ham, excuse me. Well, okay. I think that they will be high mid-table against Manchester United. Okay, so now we are on to Wolves. Now, Wolves, they could be doing worse. They beat Blackpool very well. They beat them 5-0 in the EFL Cup. They lost against Crystal Palace 3-2. They drew against Luton, but I feel like that was a poor match from the ref. I feel like they should have won that easily. So, a bit unlucky there, but they lost 3-1 against Liverpool at home. They beat Everton away from home. They lost by a pretty big margin against Brighton, and also a pretty undeservedly loss against Man United as well. So it's a bit from their performance, and also it's also kind of the rest fault, but it's good enough for me, so I'm gonna put them just scraping relegation. So that is my tier list. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and subscribe.